Senior. So that's well, I don't know if we'll wait that long, but
they just keep adding. I'm saying about the cable and WCA. Okay. And now it's senior and senior plus and senior plus plus.
It's all over. In the surgery. Chisholm and Stone.
and is it a same?
I get the mix to get together.
Like, being your car. That's what we gotta protect.
I think we gotta get a mic. We gotta get the whole picture. There's no missing buzz and stuff. I'm sure it's a preference. Oh, sure. Coffee. I'm getting too late. Water. Water. Yeah. Everything's okay.
She loves her baby.
Where is
I think it was hard to be just watching them there. Just with the audience or whatever. What's going on?
There's a lot of support there, and a lot of people that work with it. And they're not working community. I think they're not for it. It's sad when you have to give directions from the only stoplight in Canada that the water comes in. I'm sorry. Doesn't want it implied. So yeah, that's kind of hard.
Do we know what we're doing when this is over?
Yeah, we do. We do. We're going to go home.
Oh, we're going home?
We're going to go home. The restaurant is going to be very close to the house.
I mean, he's upstairs.
I dare say I want to be here.
They said we'll do 75. But we're not going to measure. Yes, yeah, I can get probably because it's October. But I haven't seen. Yeah, and I didn't. I think I'm going to miss it because now before we ordered it, can't be and then we have. I barely made it. I heard from your service. Series of firms advising if you want to.
I've heard that before, and I was like, when someone for a place to sell stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, don't miss. It's kind of like home. Yeah, I heard that. You live about 300 miles before you're
They typically rhyme. As any farm.
I suspect that there are some, you know, I got most of my growing up done back in the day when prudishness was really still a virtue. You know, I mean, I can remember when I was younger, we did at high school, we had stairways, and girls would come with their many of them. We would make sure we were always
Well positioned.
like below.
Yeah.
That was scary, just like that.
And rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way we grew up. But you know, they used to wear them.
Not like a slip, you know, something that went out.
That went out.
And they had, it was made out of, they're made out of something that that went out.
And they had, you know, came up over your waist, and it was like, there was some silk or pattern or something.
But then it went out.
Then it went out.
Then it went out. So it's like down to about here, and then it went out. So your dress
Yeah,
went
yeah.
out.
You couldn't wear a straight dress. Well, anyway, those were the days, you know, and so, and those are the days I remember particularly about this, because of the simplicity of time. And so I don't, you know, I'm not ready for all that. Had I been born yesterday, I was reading this now, because I had a chance to go walk in the world of maybe I'd be more interested in going.
I don't think so.
Well, it has
You look great.
I might not.
It's 5:30 to 7. And Wendy came up with it. Was
It's the 3 o'clock.
Yes, it is. So, I was going to say, I wanted to, I think you
Oh, okay. I was nervous, you know, and it was, I mean, it's not something that they might have put in, but they didn't have our heads, the center, and I did, and I think that that's something that changed involved. So you had a chance to see the writing, this is about getting into it, maybe
We've got new provisions.
Police officers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you got a big crowd there.
Basically,
Hey, Thursday.
previous encounters. Right, yeah. Theory of that.
that I think that my exam.
Free hot dogs, but there's only like 11. Well, we did actually, did you know that we were
Oh, that's good.
No?
I love that.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm thinking next maybe a church service.
You should know.
You know, one evening, I saw you being theatrical. I walked out to my car after hours and I was like, I think I know what's happening.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But it didn't.
We're also or carefully challenged.
Guys, we should get going. We should get started.
Yeah. What he says, I do.
Why everyone does it. Yeah. I mean, Justin is working on the legal aspects and then they'll have to find some investors and they'll have to find some customers.
Congratulations.
You should really have a cookie.
I'm expecting.
We should cook it. We want you to wait for the actually turn on. I am, I'm just going to introduce you and then get out of the way. After you speak, I'll probably use maybe 5-10 minutes to talk about some of the trade
You're the one that all right. And she claimed that getting into Jersey, she would not be where she is.
Someone yesterday.
A lot of I'm not.
That's the one they chew on.
He's not up there.
Of all the treaties you actually respect. Oh, sure.
Last night,
Hello, everyone. Hello. Are you out there?
Yeah.
Welcome. Welcome to IATP, the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. I'm Jim Harkness, the president of IATP, and really happy to see you here on this beautiful summer evening. Thanks for taking the time. We're really delighted to welcome Marty Cobenais from the Indigenous Environmental Network to talk with us about tar sands oil flowing through northern Minnesota. Everybody, who here has heard of the Keystone XL pipeline? Right, and thanks probably to you and to Indigenous Environmental Network and the communities along the proposed route in the Dakotas and Nebraska, that pipeline has been blocked for now. And, you know, we had over 1 million people comment on the government website. And we had a lot of action on the ground and publicity and a huge march in Washington that a lot of Minnesotans went to. But not that many people have heard of the Alberta Clipper, the Enbridge Corporation's Alberta Clipper, and we want to learn more about that today from Marty. And Marty, because he's waiting on a few props, asked me to say a few things about the trade implications first, and let him give you the main part of his remarks afterwards. We are the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, and one of the big fights that we were engaged in shortly after we were founded was the fight against the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. And in both NAFTA and other big trade agreements that are being negotiated now, like the Canada-EU trade agreement, there are provisions that really ratchet up and lock in production of dirty energy in Canada, and of course those agreements are being put forward in other parts of the world as well. But I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the implications for Canada. One of the unique provisions in NAFTA was something called a proportionality clause, and it's found in no other trade agreement anywhere in the history of trade agreements, and was one of the big prizes for the US in negotiating the agreement, designed to sort of lock in our access to Canadian oil, which has turned out to be dirty tar sands oil. And the proportionality clause requires Canada, let me see if I can get this right, that the proportion of their total oil output that is traded can never be lower than the average of that proportion over the previous 3 years. So, the point is, if as their oil production increases, the amount of oil that has to be exported also increases. So as the tar sands oil production has been ratcheted up, Canada has to continue exporting a larger and larger amount of that to the United States, and there's no, it's not something that the Canadian government has any control over. And this ceding of sovereignty over their natural resource policy is really really incredible, and is something that even Mexico was unwilling to do in the face of a lot of U.S. pressure. The other piece that I think is even more insidious, that was found in NAFTA and is now being pushed for in the Canada-Europe trade agreement, is something called investor-state dispute settlement provisions. And this is another one of those things where you hear it and your eyes kind of begin to glaze over. But the details are that it's a complete, basically, giveaway of our democratic control to corporations and investors. So what investor-state says is that if I make an investment in your country, I have the right, I have basically the right to sue your government on an equal footing with them if your government does something that interferes with the normal expected returns on my investment, right? And so, a current example is that the government of Uruguay, the democratically elected government of Uruguay, decided that too many other people are dying of cancer. So they decided, well, we need warning labels on our cigarette packages. Philip Morris is suing them for hundreds of millions of dollars. Because if fewer Uruguayans smoke and die, Philip Morris makes lower profits. So right now, the NAFTA agreement locks in those rights for corporate investors who are investing in tar sands oil in Canada. Welcome, welcome. And the same thing would happen for European oil companies, including Shell, BP, and Total, who are all already heavy investors. So if Canada, we hope, at some future time, wakes up and decides we don't want to pump all of this horrible, dirty tar sand oil, they could be sued. And they're not getting sued in a Canadian court, they're not getting sued in a US court. They're actually sued, it's taken before a 3-person tribunal of trade lawyers in Geneva or in Washington, D.C. The plaintiff can venue shop. And those trade lawyers invariably are people who make most of their money working for big international investors and corporations. So you can kind of imagine how most of those decisions come down. In 2012, 70% of the investor-state disputes were settled in favor of the investor, in favor of the plaintiff. And it's amounted to billions of dollars in payments from poor governments that could be using that to try to help their own people and protect their own resources and public health. And I think one of the worst things about this investor state clause is what they call regulatory chill. Because in most cases, it doesn't go to court. It doesn't go to those 3-person tribunals. In most cases, governments say, we don't want to go through the cost of passing a new law that's going to protect our environment, protect our people, protect public health, only to get sued and have to spend millions in court and then lose. And so the effect it has is that governments just don't bother trying to take new steps to ratchet up their social and environmental protections at all. It's a really terrible element that gets written into these trade agreements. The first time was in NAFTA that we're up against, and the U.S. is currently pushing 2 very large agreements, the Trans-Pacific Partnership with a number of governments in the Pacific Rim, and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, both of which include these investor state provisions, which are of course enthusiastically backed by the Chamber of Commerce and by corporations and banks in Europe and Asia. So that's a little bit about how trade deals that, people say, well, this is about free trade, that they're actually really about, locking in the privileges of big corporations and unfortunately locking in these systems of production that scientists are telling us we have to stop and we have to reverse. So that's really all I wanted to say about trade issues. And so now I want to really move to the main event and ask Marty to talk a little bit about the background of the Alberta Clipper, what the current status of it is with the recent ruling from the Public Utilities Commission, what's happening with the fight against it, and where we go from there. And after his remarks, we'll just open it up for discussion and questions and conversation, because we have a really well-informed audience here, a lot of great people from Minnesota 350 and other friends. So without further ado, Marty Cobenais.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, obviously, Jim. Just thinking here, and I've said it before, is we're sitting here talking about NAFTA and everything else. It's basically a treaty. So when's the last time the U.S. government's ever respected a treaty here? I'm not real firm on this belief, so I don't think they're going to uphold this one either. So, Bonjour, Zimbabwean, Makwadona. My name is Marty Cobenais. I am Red Lake enrollee. Been pipeline organizer for IEN now for 7 years. I've also done heavy haul. That is also in the news out in Montana again, and Idaho. The Nez Perce are out there fighting that again. That is basically bringing heavy equipment, heavy haul type equipment up a narrow 30 or 24 foot wide road that is bringing up equipment 30 feet wide, up to 300 feet long, and over 500,000 pounds. And they're bringing it up a narrow valley road, and so everyone is fighting it. The Nez Perce has actually passed a resolution against it. Their entire tribal council was arrested the other night by their own police. So, but they did come out and say that they are in support of their police department, and that they are doing what they're supposed to do, and that they are not above the law also. So, those are the type of things that I've been doing in the last few years. Obviously been arrested a few times, not in Minnesota yet, and I hope not anymore, but this kind of who I am. I started this I started this 7 years ago, but down on the bottom we'll talk a little bit more about the 1979 oil spill in Pinewood, or also known as the Bemidji spill. I grew up 2 miles away from there, so I know it quite well. I used to actually play out there and go riding up and down the bike lane. Kind of our agenda of what we're going to talk about tonight, real quick. Wide variety. How many of you guys have seen the tar sands? Or tar sands know about tar sands? Obviously, most of us. How many know about the Alberta Clipper? Okay, we'll just skip that list. This is actually the tar sands. Looks like molasses. And unfortunately, I don't have the deal with me. They brought it back with them from the fair the other day in Clearwater County. And but normally I have a deal that shows you actually what the tar sands are and bitumen and everything else like that. So you actually get to see what it looks like. This is where the Alberta tar sands are located. In the purple is kind of where they're going to do the surface mining. Or the red is going to be where they do surface mining, but total is about the size of Florida. So several billion barrels of oil are figured to be there. So this free trade agreement that we need to talk about and worry about is important for us. This is the tar sands. This is how they mine it right now, for the most part, is conventional mining, kind of like what we see up in the Iron Range and stuff like that. To give you an idea of the massive amounts of this, the trucks and stuff in there that look like Tonka toys really aren't Tonka toys. They're about 3 stories high. The world's largest dump trucks, and they're actually built in Fort McMurray because they can't haul them any other way. And I learned that in about a 2 a.m. Natural Geographic show one time. It was about showing the world's largest dump truck, and yeah, okay, I'm a nerd. But yeah, that is one of the dump trucks. So what it takes is 8 tons of dirt to make 1 barrel of oil. It takes 4 to 6 barrels of oil or water to make 1 barrel of oil. And totally it takes uses enough natural gas to heat up 6 million homes in a year. So to give you an idea how much natural waste they are, today there's just actually a report out talking about the tar sands and the carbon emissions and what they actually produce. That's actually important for us because the Keystone is being weighed on that right now, and also for the Alberta Clipper. If we can get them to say that and deny it for that reason for the Keystone, we can also get them to hopefully deny that for the Alberta Clipper. One of the things that you end up seeing here and talking a little bit about, but it's not really that well known, these yellow things are sulfur. That is actually processed out of the tar sands, and so there is no market for them, so they end up just piling them up. That's what they do. And in the back is one of the tailing ponds. So that is in the process of getting the bitumen out of the sand. They use quite a bit of water, obviously, like I said, and chemicals. That is one of the tailing ponds in the background that are toxic. Most things that land in it will die instantly. Anything that drinks it will die. So it's highly toxic and corrosive. It's kind of a before and after picture. This is what beautiful forest turns into what even James Cameron, when he went up there, called it a moonscape. And James Cameron was obviously the movie producer that made like Avatar and stuff like that. So IAN brought him up there shortly after Avatar was released, and that's what he actually saw of it. So I think always pictures are worth 1,000,000 words, I think, because I can never describe that. It's tough to look at. As I talked about the tailing ponds, they're licensed to use up to equal to 3 million. What they're taking out, if you think about it, they're producing about 2 million barrels or 2 million barrels a day of tar sands. So that's 8 to 10 million barrels of water that they're using every day. Where is that coming out of? The water, the rivers, and there's lakes that are dried up. Their aquifers are drying up. If you guys have ever watched the movie H2 Oil, if you haven't, I'd recommend it. It's an older movie now. It's kind of dated, but it came out about 5 years ago and follows the chief of Fort Chipewyan, which is 250 miles north of or downstream of the tar sands themselves. that is where they're having all the health effects, where bile duct cancers. There's 3 confirmed cases in a community of 1,200. Normally it's 1 out of 100,000 people. So, I mean, there's just all sorts of different stats and everything else I can throw at you guys. Not to scare you, but just to give you an idea of what we're actually going up
We're
against.
scared.
So, you know, one of the things, the bottom part that I put on there is that, you know, as Native people, we're supposed to talk about our 7 generations is what we're supposed to base our decisions on now. In seven generations, or about 150 years from now, these tailing ponds are still going to be there if we shut them down today. So I mean, if we just continue on right now, we're just going to eliminate and kill more up there. Right now, the people up there normally have their dietary use. Used to be 80% live off the land. Now it's the complete opposite. About 10% live off the land because all their animals are dying. One of their main staples was muskrats. There's no more muskrats in the region. The moose, the caribou, the elk, they all have growths on them. The fish have boils on them. So there's all sorts of different effects that are going on with this. Matter of fact, when the industry goes up to Fort Chipewyan and you watch H2 Oil, they offer them a drink of their own water from the river, and they refuse and they drink out of their bottled water that they brought in with them. So this is kind of more some more information as far as what all is used. And I didn't get to read the follow up too much on the CO2 emissions and everything else like that today, but that is actually a low ball from what I've seen. So if you're looking at some of these countries, and when I've actually been out in DC and gone to the Canadian Embassy and stuff like that, on the back of their business cards it says, we only produce 1/1000th of the world's carbon emissions. Okay, when is that ever a good thing for one project? So, the other technique that they use is called in situ or SAGD. Much like fracking is the same technique used. They use hot water, steam, push it down, steam goes out, the oil comes back up. Just like fracking, they don't get 100% of their water back up and the steam that they've used and the chemicals. So they're basically using this technique to poison the land again. Once they use the heat in there, there has been some experiences, but they say that they're trying to tell us that it's less carbon footprint, but then they actually move all these different lines out and cut them so that they have grids to use on. So that also then affects the migration of the animals in the area. This is what happens when the SAGD explodes. There's too much steam in the ground, it comes up. So that is deep, and that guy's just basically risking his life standing out there as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, that's a kind of a scary looking deal. That's a lot of pipelines. That's natural gas and oil pipelines. That's in 1974. So there's been obviously some more pipelines since then. Obviously we have a large amount of them. That's Clearbrook where they all come in at. But when you sit and look at like Keystone XL route, it's supposed to come through here. What we've talked about in the past is that that's actually the heart of America. You're going to put a pipeline through the heart. So, but yeah, that's kind of a scary looking picture of all the different pipelines and that we think that we're doing good on, and that we only know of a few of them. So what we're really here tonight about is talk about Enbridge's plans. Is to increase the Alberta Clipper, which is number 1 on the line, from their current state of about 450,000 barrels a day to up to 880,000 barrels per day. Why is this important for us to stop? One, and I've said it before, and I'm thinking it's going to be even more true than things I've been reading lately. Keystone XL will be denied because President Obama will say that I want to go out as a green president and have that legacy. And this has gotten too much pressure and too much publicity so that he will actually say no to it. Unfortunately, we live in Minnesota, in that we already have 6 pipelines going through northern Minnesota, actually 9. There's 3 of them through Enbridge, or 6 of them through Enbridge, and 3 of them come down to Minnesota, or come down to Minneapolis through Minnesota pipeline, Koch brothers. So if we get this increase, it will go to Superior, Wisconsin, where there's obviously talk about shipping via tankers and stuff like that over the Great Lakes. That is not a new phenomenon. That was actually in progress before until 1992. Then they ceased it, and now we're looking at it again. What they're planning on doing is going from Superior, Wisconsin to over by Toledo, Ohio, where there's a refinery there. And if you look at number 8 through here, how many of us have heard of Mayflower, Arkansas? That is a natural gas line that they reversed and they pump tar sands through. Line number 8 is called the trunk line. That is a natural gas line going to the north right now. They're looking at reversing and filling that 20-inch pipeline to the south. So doing the exact same as what they did in Arkansas. So that is one of their techniques. With that then, there's also the line number 6 from Superior down to Flanagan, Illinois. They also want to do, where am I looking at? They have 400,000 barrels going through it now. They want to increase it to 560 with a maximum capacity of 1.2 million barrels per day. That's a 41-inch pipeline. It's not too old. And so they want to increase that one also. So when you look and see, like I just saw today in a letter from Representative Hornstein, writing to the Public Utilities Commission, telling him that what they're doing with approving at the PUC level is actually illegal because it is not supplying Minnesota or the surrounding states with oil. So if you guys see or know Representative Hornstein, thank him for his letter. It's important for us. From Flanagan, there's line number 11. It's called Flanagan South. They are building that one. It's a new pipeline. It's going it's going up to 585,000 barrels to 800,000 barrels a day to Cushing. Cushing, Oklahoma. When you enter it, Cushing, Oklahoma, it says pipeline capital of the world. And it really is. They hold up to 100,000 barrels, or 100 million barrels of oil per day. So when you think about national security, that is the center of oil pipeline. And they always say why we need more pipelines is because Cushing is always backed up. But Cushing gets it from the south and the north and the east and the west, so it's like the center. And then they ship it out through different pipelines. So if you look back at like the 1974 picture, that's one of the main hubs. But what they did was they went into partnership and they bought the Seaway from Cushing, Freeport, Houston area. That used to flow to the north. That now flows south. So when we have these pipelines that go through, it just has a direct link. So when we say no to the Keystone XL, they just increase it and they still get a port down to Houston, just like they wanted with Keystone. They already have that port with Keystone 1, and they've just completed building Keystone, the southern portion from Cushing down to Houston, but that's not in use yet. So that is another route for them to go. Next one. From Superior over to Sarnia and Detroit, they're also building and rebuilding line number 2. From Flanagan and in that area, line number 2 is 6B. 6B is what exploded into the Kalamazoo, Michigan area and the river, to which they're trying to still clean up. That's gotten over $100 million in cleanup, and 2.5 years later, and it's still not cleaned up, and EPA is still telling them it's still not cleaned up. So what they're doing there is they're rebuilding that, replacing it, going over to Detroit and Sarnia, Superior line 5 up around the upper Michigan. They're planning on increasing that by 50,000 barrels per day. That is normally what I read, and everything else is normally more light crude, which is what they're asking for more Canadian, or from North Dakota and stuff like that. But that's an old pipeline. Talking with people in Michigan, when you go, you guys ever been across the big bridge up there? It's like miles and miles long. The pipeline is laid at the bottom of the lake. Okay, and then there's another deeper valley in the middle of it, the big channel in the middle of it. It's just laying across it, so it's not buried or anything else like that. And that's startling in itself, but we also have that the same thing going on in Minnesota too, which we'll get to. When it gets to Sarnia, Detroit, line number 3 goes up to Montreal. That is what line 9 is what they're calling that in Enbridge's terms. They want to reverse that, so it goes to the north up to Montreal. And then there's another pipeline that is not owned by Enbridge, but by another company, and it goes from Montreal to Portland, Maine. They want to reverse that one also so that they have an export to Portland, Maine, which is on the East Coast, and they can ship it out from there. So Alberta Clipper is the huge blocking pin. If we can stop the increase here, we can stop a lot in almost all of their other increases. And they've put millions of dollars into this. The only one that requires a presidential permit is the Alberta Clipper. So it's important for us to pass, you know, they're looking at right now PUC in two situations, phase 1 and phase 2. They just got phase 1's approval. We're waiting to hear if there's going to be a contested case hearing on that one. But then phase 2 is still going into effect. That is going to push it up to the full 880,000 barrels a day. How do they do that? They don't add any more pipelines. They don't do anything like that. They add new pumping stations. There's 6,000 horsepower pumps that they will install. In the phase 1, there's 5 of them, and Kathy, help me out. Phase 2, how many are there in phase 2? I know there's 6 different communities.
I don't remember, I've got this certificate.
So,
There's 3 more stations.
so there's actually more than 3 more stations. There's 6 towns involved in that. One of them is Cass Lake, to which we'll get to here shortly. But this is what the 36-inch pipeline. This is one of the lakes in northern Minnesota. This is Four-Legged Lake in Leonard, Minnesota. If you see over on the far right or left-hand side, you see a dumpster over there. On the other side of those woods is where the Red Lake land is, which we'll get to later. But this is important for us because they say that this pipeline does not affect the Red Lake land. Well, it will because there's a culvert on the other side, that there's another lake on the other side of the road that our land is on too. So this is important because I have one of the old inspectors that was there during the hydraulic drilling, and he said that they drilled through here a rock that was about the size of a minivan, and it took 3 bits, diamond bits, to go through one rock. So those rocks, or those diamond bits, are between $75,000 to $100,000 each. So I'm sure that they weren't too happy about it, but they just bored through it anyways. And what they do then is they put the oil, they drill through underneath, and then they push and pull the pipe through it. So they just keep on welding it together, and they push it through and pull it through as they go. And they don't really check it. There's no way for them to check it after they put it in. So when you go through a rock like that, he's like, I guarantee you that lake's gonna have a leak in it. He said when you go through that big of a rock and you only have probably a 1/4 inch gap on each side of it, as big as you have, he said you're gonna hit a rock. So he's basically guaranteeing me that one. One of the lines I haven't talked about, line 13. Line 13 was put in when the Alberta Clipper was put in. Right now it's carrying about 50,000 barrels of diluent. So when we talk about pipelines and like the Alberta Clipper, they put in there a mixture called dilbit, diluted bitumen. The diluted part is diluents. It's unknown chemicals to us. It's a trade secret. We did get to see the booklet the other day at the PUC that says trade secret on it and do not disseminate and everything else like that, and we took pictures of it. But that is as close as we've gotten to see what the actual chemical makeup is of this. It's basically benzenes, napazines, any other type of zines you can think of. A lot of them are airborne, but a lot of them are also liquid states, so that it makes the oil flow sooner. But they want to increase that. Right now it's at 120 or 50,000 barrels per day. They want to actually increase it up to 275. That is also through the PUC right now too, in that they're trying to push that through. I have not heard though if that's going to require a presidential permit, but I would think I don't know if it will actually, because it's going an export, not an import. So I don't think that we're gonna have a presidential permit process on that. That is just be a Public Utilities Commission issue.
It's going back to Alberta from Chicago?
Yeah, yep, from Chicago, they take it out of the bitumen and that they get out of Chicago, and they ship it back up. But there's also other pipelines that come up from Houston and stuff like that, that push it up to Chicago. So this is that's why the bigger increases, because that's where most of the pipe or the refineries can process the heavy crude oil is down in Houston. Valeros and stuff like that, they will ship that diluent back up because there is a process and it's expensive and everything else. And I know if they're trying to say that it's green, that way they can, so they're recycling, but it's not good.
Was
Joe.
that the leak that happened June 1st, that coming back from Texas?
No, no. This is the Superior Refinery. Way off in the north up there, or on top is Lake Superior, but that is where this pipeline is going to. So it's not too far away from Lake Superior. It does cross like underneath the river down by Cloquet. So that is where it kind of comes down and goes through Cloquet area. I know I've had other people ask me, where's it go through in Duluth area? It doesn't go through Duluth. It goes through Cloquet, so it goes around and up. Okay. How many of you guys know that Red Lake has some land up there? Well, we have 8.5 acres of land that and I know that several of you have been there via the 350 buses and vans and carloads and that have shoveled and spent cold nights up there with us and everything else. A couple years ago, well, about a year and a half ago now, I suppose, I discovered from one of the tribal council members that Red Lake owns land in Leonard, Minnesota, 8.5 acres, and that there's 4 pipelines that go through our land. But there's never been an easement for it, so they have no permission to be on our land. And the last August, a year ago now, the tribal chairman wrote a letter to Enbridge telling them, you need to remove your pipelines. And we don't want them on our land, you have no easement for it. They did not talk to them until April. On February 28th, we started an encampment. Yes, February 28th. No brains. But we did set up camp, and we have since then built a fence, because Enbridge says there cannot be a permanent structure over the pipelines, or else they will have to shut them down. So we built a fence. They did not do anything. The pipelines continued to flow. So, when was it? May? Done? Was it in May? In May we moved a trailer house, a 14 by 70 trailer house onto the land. And that still has not done anything. So since then, I've also called Pipeline Hazardous Material and Safety Administration out in DC and Kansas City and told them about it. And they basically have told me that is not a PIMSA issue because it does not affect the integrity of the pipe. So we're down to, they said that's kind of a policy, a company policy. And so now it comes down to, okay, now what do we do from here? How much trouble do we want to get in? So I'm going to leave that alone since we're on webcast. But this is who we are. This is obviously we've set up teepees. We've been burnt out once because of grass fires. We obviously in wintertime, this is part of the 350 group that came up to help shovel. We had Angie. She got arrested after 3 hours of being locked down to Enbridge's office. They arrested her for trespassing at 4:30 when it was closing time. But that's the only reason they said they'd arrest her, is because it was actually closing time and she refused to leave. But otherwise, Enbridge told us that we had every right to protest them and that they respected that. So they didn't want to actually arrest anybody, so we actually really took over their offices And with the police standing inside, we stood out obviously right in the front and no problems. And she was arrested. She's actually, I think she went to court this morning, still on the court case. She's still going through pre-trial and everything else like that. So they've asked Enbridge to just dismiss the case, and so far they haven't. But it's kind of ironic that she was there on the Enbridge land, got charged with trespassing. They have been on our land for 64 years and have not been charged with trespassing. This is one of the lines. In 1949 was the first line. So yes, 64 years. And for those who have gone walk or come up on tours and stuff like that with the 350 group, you actually get to walk on exposed pipeline and take your pictures. It's bigger than Paul and Babe. So we will, if any of you guys want to come up there and take a look and walk, that's part of our fame, I guess, now. But this is on the Red Lake land, is where these were taken. So obviously you see where the lake is on the other side of us. Earlier I talked about Leech Lake, or Cass Lake. And I just showed you lines 1 and 2 that were built in 53 and 49. This is where they go. On the bottom of Cass Lake. And for some reason, in all of the conversations and everything else, they have never brought up the economic downfall with one of those leaks. If you talk about Kalamazoo, Michigan and Arkansas and what it's done to their communities as far as with the leaks, this would absolutely kill Cass Lake. It would cause, it would end up destroying the ecosystem there. There's also lines 3 and 4 and 67 and 13 go right along the highway. So there's 6 pipelines in this area that could contribute to this. It crosses the Mississippi River just south of Bemidji for the first time. And so the same kind of goes there. It's about half a mile up to Lake Irving and then another quarter mile to Lake Bemidji. So if you have a leak there, any of those 6 lines, they would end up destroying the lake. They just did some construction on the Mississippi River a couple summers ago where they ended up building almost like a dam in the middle of the river, and so that they could go down, do their work in dry, and the river just kind of flowed around them, and they made it waterproof, and they went down there and worked on it. But that is some of the scary stuff that we have going on up there. This is line 3. Line 3, PIMS has told them you need to replace this one, or you needed to put it up at a lower capacity than what you have. So they flow it about halfway, 50% capacity, because it's been so damaged and has so many different faults in it that's the only way they can end up doing it. 1972 was the final one that they built way back when. 800,000 barrels a day. That also carries bitumen, Canadian bitumen also, besides some other chemicals or other light and medium crudes. So they can put through batches at a time. It's not just all blended into one deal, and so a lot of them will carry different things. Here's a quick list of some of the spills they've had. Obviously, Enbridge is not too good, but yet they say they have 99.9%. I need to know what they call it. I know success, and that they say that they only have those. But I suppose when you have thousands of miles of spills and you only have one, like the Deer River spill, they don't even know how many. They just guesstimated at 250,000 or 250 gallons. They didn't actually know they even had a leak there, but it was a 1-inch crack in the pipe, and so there's no pressure loss in their pipe, so they didn't know. But their pig that they send through, that they're required to send through once every 2 years, picked it up 9 months ahead of time that there's an anomaly there, but they never went out to look at it because there's no federal law that says how often you only have to send the pig through so often. You don't have to actually go fix the pipe if you see something wrong with it. So they don't actually know how long that was leaking. The firefighters that were out putting out a forest fire discovered the leak and saw the sheen on the water, and then it also raised up the fire as it went through, so they ended up having to clean that up. Which there are some pictures coming up of that spill. Actually, here it is. Obviously you have lines 1 and 2 exposed. So when the fire went through, they actually burnt the outside asphalt that covers them, and it kind of made a mess. The white stuff is actually not snow, even though it was in April. It's these. What I did basically call oil diapers. And they're specifically designed for oil spills, and that they only soak up oil and no water. So the funny part, well, I know funny part's the right word, the sad part about it is, this guy standing here, this is their cleanup, okay, high tech. This guy with this pole is picking those up out of the water, putting it in that garbage can, and that's cleanup. It took them over 2 years to clean up the site with Leech Lake involved and Leech Lake Environmental Program being in charge. Enbridge told them several times that we'd rather have Minnesota PUC or a pollution control agency in charge of picking this cleanup because you guys are too picky. So part of what we were working on this spring with Kathy and some other people was trying to get legislatures through to enhance their cleanup and what they have to do to meet even what Leech Lake does and stuff like that. Obviously, if they don't want to work with the tribes because their cleanup methods are too intense and too invasive for them, if we do that for the state of Minnesota, they're not going to want to do that either. So, but that's a good sign for Leech Lake. It's unfortunately that we don't have that same criteria for the rest of the state. Some of the other things that have gone on, in 2007, pipelines explosion killing 2 people, 2 of the workers. 1979, one of the things that when you come up and do the tour with us in 350 is we go out to the actual spill site and we look around and everyone sees all the wells that they've drilled, the test sites. They test different things from the water, the aquifer, which is about 15 feet below, to putting it right into the oil that is remaining to see how microbacterial bugs are eating away the oil and making methane in the ground instead of leaving the oil in the ground. Right now that is actually stagnant and is staying in one spot, so that's a good thing. But some of the things that they've learned through there is not necessarily good, in that the way they remediate oil spills in the U.S. and stuff is that they've learned that if they put oxygen down into the ground, those microbacterial bugs will actually increase their activity. So that will then mean that they can start leaving their spills in the ground, drilling holes, putting oxygen down there, and those microbacterial bugs will clean up the site supposedly on its own, but they have no idea how long that oil will be in the ground in that process. So that is one of the bad things about this site. They come up every 2 years, or every 2 weeks in the year, and universities from around the world. The other day when we were out there, or when I was out there, there's a gentleman from Switzerland doing research. So I mean, this is a worldwide international research center. What can we do? Obviously there's a presidential permit that we need to do, that we all have a word on, and that I encourage everyone to do. We also have the PUC process. Right now I think the PUC process is flawed greatly. But we asked for public hearings to be held in all the communities and one in Minneapolis, and they refused us on phase 1 for the public meeting in Minneapolis. But for phase 2, we haven't heard yet where they're going to do the public hearings. By law, they have to do at least one, but we don't know where or when. They only have to required to do a 10-day notice ahead of time. So we have to be kind of fluid on that one. Community education, we've been doing a lot up lately in northern Minnesota. Myself, 350, Pat came up also, and we're starting to hit the fairs. It's fair time in northern Minnesota, so we hit Clearwater County last weekend. This coming up weekend, they're looking for and getting volunteers to go up to Itasca County Fair, which is in Grand Rapids. which the pipeline also goes through. So politically, I think we can all get out and talk to our representatives, Franken, Klobuchar, Nolan, it goes through Nolan's district, Peterson's district. One of the politically wise down here is Keith Ellison, who's very much opposed to any of this, so he's a good one to at least thank in his opposition to this. Nonviolent direct action, civil disobedience, obviously we've done that with an arrest, but you know, there probably could be more options coming up later on. The other thing that one of the things that they've done is in Canada, they're still trying to push forward, Enbridge is still trying to push forward to it, is build the Northern Gateway, and that goes from Edmonton area to the west coast. And they want to do that and go through tribal lands and indigenous lands, and the native people up there have just been awesome, to say the best. But they've been out in the middle of the woods, literally going along the pipeline route, building houses out in the middle of nowhere and cabins, so that they can't say that they're not using that land and everything else. So it's been pretty good for them. This is my contact information. I'm also on Facebook. So with that, I want to say miigwech. Thank you. And I guess we're going to leave it up to questions now.
Yeah. First of all, thanks. One other, in terms of, you know, what we can do to get back to the trade issue, another decision point that's going to come up is whether or not Congress grants trade promotion authority, which is also known as fast track, to the executive branch. And President Obama on July 30th in a speech actually formally requested Congress to give him that authority. If he has that authority, the U.S. Trade Representative has that authority, there's a much better chance that new free trade agreements like this US-EU agreement will go through, and that agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership will go through. And so it's really important that we work on our congressional representatives here in Minnesota so that they will vote against fast track. But I think there's also a lot more concrete stuff that we can do here in the state, and I encourage you to follow up with Marty and 350 to see how you can get involved. Questions and comments?
For Marty.
And identify yourself maybe first and stand up.
Hello, my name is Eric Angel. Nice to see you all. I had a question for Marty first. I was wondering, the lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 13, 67, is that Enbridge numbering those, and is that like chronological, like the number of pipelines that they've been administering, or do you know what the numbers come from?
1 through 4, Enbridge actually bought the Lakehead pipeline system from Lakehead pipeline system way back. Then they were actually they were part owner of them before, and Lakehead was part of their system. But as far as numbering, I have no clue how they come up with those numbers. I would presume it's probably through their number of pipelines and everything else, but I have no scientific way of hearing of how they name those. You know, some of them actually have names like Alberta Clipper and Southern Light Diluent Line, where the older ones just 1, 2, 3, 4. So kind of tough.
Yep, John Schmidt, I'm with them in 350. I have 2 questions, and I guess one is the Alberta Clipper, is that one of the lines that goes through the Red Lake land or not? Or
No, it goes right across the road.
Okay, the exposed pipe, actually somebody was asking this question. There's exposed pipe on the Red Lake land and also elsewhere, right, or not?
There's none on the actual Red Lake land.
Yeah, okay.
We've actually tried finding some through the swamp, but we can't find any.
Okay. Well, somebody asked me, like, you know, they didn't put it this way, but I mean, if you have hunters out with like assault weapons or something hunting, is there a danger of them hitting the pipeline where it's exposed and damaging it, or not?
Yes, there is. That would actually be a very scary situation.
Yeah.
But also through some of the exposed pipeline routes through the swamps and stuff that are in the area between even Clearbrook to Bemidji. They also use that as mud runs. for their big 4-wheel drive trucks and for 4-wheelers and 6-wheelers and everything else like that. So there's actually been sites where you can actually walk out and see where they've actually hit it with vehicles. You know, one of the good things about most of this pipeline is that it's underground, not like, you know, a lot of people say, well, why do they put it above the ground and stuff like that? When you look at Trans-Canada or Trans-Alaska pipeline, there's actually people who have shot it and they've had massive oil spills because of it. So is that a possibility? Yes, it is a very real possibility, that, and it's very real because there's actually quite a few deer stands along that route, because it's easy hunting. You can sit up in one tree and see for miles, or at least until the next hill. But if they shoot and they miss and they hit a pipeline, yes, it can. Very long answer to a short question.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan Boardman. I'm curious, the original pipelines were all oil, and then they made a switch to do the tar sands. Didn't they have to get some special, when they switch things that they're putting in the pipe, they don't have to get authorization to make that kind of switch, or?
They will require that in most of them, but only one of them actually carries tar sands oil. That's line 4, and that's only a part-time type of a deal. So it's not, normally what they normally have to ask for increases is when they ask for increases over like 20% or 10% or something. I forget the actual number, but that's the only time they really have to ask for increases. They don't have to, there's really no regulatory commission that says, we're gonna switch it over to this now. And it's normally a state permitting, like when you get into Arkansas and everything else, unless it crosses an international border, there's no federal real process.
It changed in the 2006 or 7 when they built that, and they started doing tar sands then.
Right, and that was what they even admitted that they were going to be carrying was tar sands in 2007 when they started the process of applying for this, for 67.
I'm Bob Weedman. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the kind of bigger picture of tar sands. You know, what I've heard on a number of occasions. Well, you know, if Keystone XL goes through, you know, game over for climate change, right? So, but it seems like there's a good chance that we could stop that. It seems like there's a chance that we could stop the Alberta Clipper, right? There's all this talk about, well, they're gonna, you know, just ship it to the, they'll ship the tar sands oil to the west coast. But the tribal leaders seem to be stopping that. What's next? What else is on the horizon to be thinking about?
I guess I'm not a real economics person,
Yeah.
but I guess if we can start denying some of these pipelines and the investors start to get worried, and there are people that are starting to pull out of the tar sands because of all the resistance that is being led. You know, Total, one of the oil pipeline or oil companies in France. Statoil, I don't know, I probably butchered that name. It's the Norwegian oil company. They're talking about pulling out. And matter of fact, in their last presidential election there, 8 of the 9 candidates were opposed to the tar sands in general. So it's a huge issue in European countries. Most of the tar sands go into diesels. So that is what they're looking for in the European nations, is for diesel to get there. So I think the biggest thing is to try and shut down as many of these as we can, so the investors start going away. And then obviously if the investors start going away, that will decrease. The other thing that, you know, if you look historically back at the tar sands, back in the 70s, it almost got crushed because of the low oil prices, that they couldn't afford to do it anymore. Because it's one of the most expensive ways for them to get it out is, you know, $30 to $40,000 or $30 to $40 a barrel is what they figure. Where when gas prices were $10 a barrel, it wasn't worth it for them. Now when the price of barrel is $80 a gallon or barrel, you know, it's worth it for them to go into that. Even though they sell it for about $50 a barrel, because they have to sell it cheaper to get it exported. You know, but that's one of those things that we, I think that we as common people, I guess, is that we need to really look at it and say, why would we want this oil to get to export as the United States? And I'm not endorsing this by any means, but if they get the oil to market, that price then goes up. And why would the oil companies actually want that to get to market if they're buying it at a cheap rate, they're selling it at a world market price? Why would they, and they're making record profits, why would they want to cut into their profit margins? It doesn't make sense to me. But I'm not an economist, so I can't even say the word.
In terms of the bigger picture, and if it doesn't come here, where will it go? One of the reasons that the Canada-EU trade agreement hasn't moved all the way forward is because the EU has dirty fuel restrictions, and tar sands oil would be restricted, and Canada has been very unhappy about that. And so, any work that we can support that's imposing new restrictions on dirty forms of fuel, anything we can do to promote alternatives in those other markets is really important. And of course, the other big market is China, and that's where that West Coast oil and already coal would be going to. And so, supporting any activity that will eliminate restrictions on or promote alternatives in places like China is absolutely essential.
I think one of the other things, like the old chicken and egg type of question, only it's pipelines now. In that if we build the pipelines, will they increase the amount of oil to fill it? Or are they producing more oil so that we have to take it, which is through the NAFTA situation? So we're kind of stuck in that chicken and egg type situation here of what's going on here. So
I have a comment and a question. The first comment is Brian Novak, and I'm with CCL, which is Citizens Climate Lobby, and with Minnesota 350. So the quickest way to put a hurt on oil economically is to put a carbon tax in place. An effective carbon tax over a 10-year period the highest rate would go to the dirtiest fuels. So that would affect tar sands oil first. And since it's on such a tenuous spot with the $100 a barrel area, that would put it out of business pretty quickly. The second question I have is on pipeline number 3. Two of us from Min 350 and Paul Blackburn met with Senator Klobuchar's office to talk about pipeline safety. And Kathy had given us a memo on pipeline number 3 that was written many, many years ago. In fact, it's so old that the pipeline inspectors from the PUC, or the Pollution Control Agency that wrote it, they've actually retired. And PIMSA has done nothing, and PIMSA is the Pipeline Hazardous Safety Administration. What can you talk about PIMSA's role in the fight that we're trying to do with pipeline safety, which if they built safe pipelines would also put a huge economic hurt on Enbridge?
first, PIMSA is a joke. Sorry for the world to know that. But PIMSA is actually run by oil companies. There's 15 members, 7 of them are pipeline industry, direct industry. Another 7 are politicians that come from states like Texas and Oklahoma and Alaska that are basically oil states. So they kind of go along with whatever the pipeline companies say they want to do. There's one other person on there. His name is Carl. He works with Pipeline Safety Trust out of Seattle, Washington. He's actually a good guy on our side, and he kind of tries to keep them level, but he's 1 out of 15 people. So he's very good at what he does, and he knows the inside and out of PIMSA. PIMSA only has 110 employees for thousands and tens of thousands of miles of pipeline. Obviously, what I showed you, they are extremely thin, so it is a self-governing industry. So basically, like they told me, even with the pipeline in Leonard Land, is that That's not their jurisdiction. They're not gonna, and they actually told me on the phone that we have no jurisdiction over Indian lands, which floored me when he said that. So, so as far as PIMSA, I don't see them as a great savior for us, only unless they come in, if there's a spill, that's about the only time they come in. But otherwise, even when they go in to the ground, the new pipelines go into the ground, PIMSA does not actually have control over them until the oil starts flowing.
Can Congress make their life miserable?
If we can find enough congressmen to do that, that'd be wonderful. But we have quite a few in Congress right now that are pretty oil. Obviously, when you watch the votes and stuff that have been coming up lately, they're trying to put Keystone on everything as a rider, and you know it's going through the House very quickly and favorably. You know, that's a scary sign for me. You know, I don't know how many of you guys live in Colin Peterson's district, but he's voted for it every time. He'll vote for the Keystone XL every time, but yet he also pushes for ethanol in the entire western half of Minnesota because it's a corn-based. So that's his farmers. But yet he's also voting for the dirtiest tar sands, but yet he's voting for a greener, pushing for a greener oil. So I mean, it doesn't really make sense for us. So those are those things that are going on. And I don't know if I answered your question completely.
You did a good job.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Melinda. I have a couple questions. First, I've read a couple editorials in the newspaper and other opinion pieces after a few derailments of freight trains carrying oil about how if we stop the pipelines, it's just going to go to freight instead, and that's more dangerous, so we should let pipelines go through. How do you respond to people that are talking about this? Because I don't think that pipelines are a good idea either. And second, you talk about how when they're increasing the flow, they're just increasing the pump stations. Does that mean that the oil is flowing faster, and is there more danger to pipelines as a result?
I'll answer the second one first. There is actually more danger. They also increase the amount of pressure going through the pipeline. So it's, when you look at even Keystone and Alberta Clipper, it's over 1,600 pounds per square inch in a 36-inch pipeline. So if you get a little hole in it, say a bullet, no, I didn't say that. It would spill out, you know, it'd be a geyser. Kind of what they saw in the Keystone 1 pipeline and all those valves and flanges and stuff that they have leaking over there. You know, a guy was a quarter mile away and he could see the oil spraying up in the air as a geyser. So I mean, the oil pressures, yes, they do increase. As far as the question about safer transportation, I say there's no safe transportation. I'm not going to get into the well, this one's fast and this one's better or anything else like that. I think we just need to leave the oil in the ground, and it needs to stay there for a reason. It wasn't created necessarily for all this that we're using it for. So that's, but we do need to figure out there is no safe situation. There's obviously been shipwrecks. There's during the same time, not too long ago, when all these other oil spills are going on with pipelines and trains and everything else like that. There was also a tanker spill in, I believe, New Jersey, that hit a bridge, and it spilled. So I mean, there's lots of different things that have gone on that we don't know about. You know, obviously Exxon Valdez was a huge oil tanker too. So I mean, when they talk about the Northern Gateway and what the tribes have done up there, one of the other things that the British Columbian government has also said is that when they take those tankers out from the port, which is inland, and goes through the fjords or you know, that type of rugged terrain, it will wreck. And they said there will be shipwrecks in there. So they're already guaranteeing there will be oil spills. So that's not, any of the ways of them transporting it is not safe.
Someone in the back?
Yes. I'm Anita, just one individual that's just upset about the environment, and I'm glad that 350's here. I see a few members from Occupied Minneapolis, Occupied Minnesota here. I looked back on Enbridge's website a few months ago, and they were talking about diverting away from the Clear Brook area. Well, it upsets me, by the time there, it's convenient for them, they're gonna keep running it. And with all the cancers I've seen in my family, my sister, lung cancer, her roommate just got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Young man I met at the hospital, he was doing some landscaping up by a cast lake there, or a resort. He dug in the ground, breathed something, and it almost killed him. It's just, why is it that it's still flowing? You know, I wish you'd bring the video. I love that video, the one where they're making the fence. Love that video. It's a great video. I wish you'd bring it to all your talks because it's just an amazing video. But it's like, why they're by law supposed to be required to shut down and they haven't. It's like, I wish we had some engineers that could go in there and shut the damn thing off. You know, somehow figure out some kind of way to stop that pipeline. It's just like, and then it's like, hey, then not allow them on the land to try to repair it.
Well,
How do you do that without creating another spill?
Right, that's for us and what some of the things that we've looked at doing, without being too much on webcam right now. But I mean, it doesn't matter. But I mean, there are different things that we're trying to do. Right now, through Leech Lake Tribal Council, I've been working with them lately and putting just create a draft resolution for them to look at. And I guess on Tuesday there's going to be a meeting where the Tribal Council is looking at my resolution to deny the Keystone or the Alberta Clipper expansion going through the reservation. You did talk about the new line that's called the Sandpiper. That's going to be Bakken Oil coming into Clearbrook. Leech Lake has already told them, no, you're not coming through our land. You need to go around our land and you need to go around our treaty land. That would make the pipeline, if they're going to make it, go down by Brainerd area and then across over to down by Cloquet and stuff like that, kind of following the 210 corridor.
Right.
So is that an alternative? Is that a good alternative? No, it's not a good alternative for any of this. But there are different things that I know. I've talked to other people in the area that said, well, you know, they're not going to do anything to you on Red Lake because they have no jurisdiction. I mean, obviously we have a trailer house up there. And even PIMSA says that they shouldn't be having that because if there is a leak, then there's no way for them to actually get in there and clean it up. And so that's why they want to keep the easements and right-of-ways free of trailer houses and fences, is so that they don't have to clean up or make more work for themselves to do that. But since they have no easement on Red Lake land in Leonard, we're just basically there and they don't care. As far as they're concerned, unless we actually dig down to the pipeline and do something in the pipeline, they're not going to do anything to us.
Has trespassing charges been brought against them?
I've heard that through Red Lake Tribal Council. I've heard that in the rumors. I have yet to see the paperwork though, that they're supposedly charging them through federal court for trespassing, which would then also charge them with the damages of them being on the land for 64 years. So that would be one of the restitution processes that they'd have to do. Red Lake has told them to stop the flow of the pipeline already and to remove the pipelines off of our land. They figured that would cost them about $15.5 million. One of the things that the tribe has also said they've gotten is an injunction through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but yet they're not enforcing that yet because Enbridge has then threatened them that for any amount of oil that they lose going through the pipeline and income, they would sue the tribe for that. Which I would just say, just double your fine then through the courts and say, we can play this game, and you know we'll come out on the other end of it fine because you're still going to end up paying for it. The rumors that we've also heard is that they, I forget the name of the attorney right now, but I'll think of the name of the attorney sometime during the day, and that's representing them in any legal cases in Red Lake, Leech Lake. We did fight it in Leech Lake, and that is going through the appeal process right now still. 3 years later, they're finally getting the appeal process because of the new tribal council. So we are still fighting that one in Leech Lake also through the courts. So it's hard, even with our own tribal governments, to pass anything. And you know, it's tough when you're in northern Minnesota or any of these communities. They fall for the economic blackmail of it, in that they say, we'll buy you a new fire truck and, you know, to help you save your community, but you know, in Clearbrook they have fire trucks, but if one of the tanks go up at the tank farm, they don't have enough technology to put it out. And so, you know, there's stuff like that that just unreal that you can discover and find out and read that you can just, that's scary and all, as all get out, so.
So some of these pipelines are more than 60 years old, and you said that it's nearly impossible to actually do a physical inspection of the pipes once they're down there. So who's in charge of saying like, yes, these have the structural integrity to have these like bumps up in volume and pressure? And if you can do a inspection like that, who does it and who has to pay for it?
Enbridge has to do an inspection every 2 years, sending a smart pig. It's a device that goes through the pipeline, and it's kind of like our big radar and an X-ray machine, and it goes through and it does the denseness of the steel to see if there's any cracks or rust or anything else like that. And that's what they have to do that's under federal law that they have to do that.
Wouldn't that only identify like existing weaknesses and not how much it can actually handle? It would see a problem after it's a problem?
They do have that technology, and each of the pipelines do have a capacity depending on how thick or how big in diameter they are.
Yeah.
Like the 36-inch pipelines are roughly about 880,000 barrels a day.
Yeah.
That is about their capacity.
Yeah.
So with that, then the 20-inch pipelines have less. The 30-inch pipelines have less. So they do have that criteria already through the public, through federal. But as far as anything else, yeah, they don't. And when you think about the pigs and stuff like that, those are all managed by the pipeline companies too. So they're reading their own equipment. PIMS is not really coming in until there's actually an accident. Unless there's something major going on, there's keep on doing maintenance and stuff like that.
Is there any way to find out how much money they actually spend on like actual inspections, like safety inspections? Or is it like we'll put this through every 2 years and the data goes somewhere and we don't look at it again?
Yeah, that's pretty much about it. They do fly the pipelines every week, just looking for spills. So they do quite a bit of surveillance by plane and helicopter and stuff like that. But as far as when they determine that the oil pipeline is actually going to be decommissioned or put out of use is actually by the pipeline company themselves, and that's based on their economics of it. Is it costs too much for us to continue to keep replacing and repairing this pipe? That's the only reason they'd ever shut down a pipeline.
And the New York Times had an article about the citation for spill. Actually, it was for lack of monitoring on Enbridge's part. So they don't do well.
No, that was up in Canada where they do normally about 1% of the violations is about how many they get that actually get fined for. It's only 1%.
Right. They just say they don't count all of them.
Yeah.
Stan Sattinger, I'm with MN 350 and Citizens Climate Lobby also. There's a ray of hope here in regard to line 67, what they're going to upgrade. That means pushing more oil through. If you followed the Keystone XL issue, you know that there was a what's called an EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, that was done and then redone most recently in the spring. And there was opportunity to comment on the EIS, the content of the EIS, later in the spring. And organizations like 350 and Sierra Club beat the bushes and rounded up over 1 million public comments that really slowed down the approval process. If Keystone's in trouble, it could be largely the outcome of having that public comment period responded to in spades like it was. Well, the same thing's going to happen on Enbridge, on line 67. There's an EIS being written as we speak, and it's going to become public in weeks or a month or two. I'm not sure of the timing. we should keep an eye on this. And there'll be opportunities for the whole country to chime in, just like they did on Keystone. And it could really put a crimp in the chances of the Line 67 upgrade passing or getting approved. It's also got to go through the State Department and through the President, just like Keystone.
Well, I hate to be the devil's advocate, but energy is needed by the world. It's getting more and more. We all know that China and India are modernizing, and solar and wind can only do a small percent, even if we tapped it extensively. So what? They're going to keep scampering for the oil. The money, people want to grab all the money they can who have the vested interests. So what now? I mean, it's going to keep happening. You stop this, they're going to come up somewhere else. Like you said, they make a new
I
one.
see some folks from Minnesota 350 who might have some comments on that.
I'm sorry, Warren, I was just at a meeting Monday with Minnesota people talking about alternatives, and they don't take that picture. They feel that wind and solar can be a big, huge part. They look what Germany's doing. I think they spread that story around that that's not possible.
Yeah.
We somehow need to make people.
Like on every parking lot have solar panels. With all that
There's
space.
a lot of things that can be done. I don't think it's that small of a.
Oh, I just questioned what, because I've been gone this summer and I haven't gone to 350 meetings lately, and I just, I appreciate that.
That was with, actually,
Ellen
Anderson
Yes.
was there and other people regarding renewables. It was at a meeting at the downtown library on Monday night. They said that they felt that a big portion could be renewables, and that's what they're doing in Germany.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So
So more of that just has to happen.
for the people back, I can.
John again. Yeah, I've heard that once these North Dakota oil fields get up to their full exploitation capacity, that the economic viability of this tar sand stuff will be like history. Is any of the North Dakota stuff going to be exported? Is there enough there? Or I just wonder how that plays into it.
There are some oil pipelines already in place, and that's why they're trying to get the sandpiper in. In talking with Kathy and stuff like that some of the oil refineries are actually asking to decrease their amount of tar sands already, and they want the sweet crude oil out of North Dakota more than they do want the tar sands. So there is some truth to that, and that I'm hoping that but like you just brought up devil's advocate, is that at what point do we stop poisoning the land and killing the land? When you're looking at the hard to get oil, even in Utah, where they're doing the tar sands right now, and there's blockades and everything else going on like that, oil is going to come to an end sometime soon. It may not be in my lifetime. It may not, but it may. Because we're going through so much per day right now, that we need to find those alternatives. We want to keep wearing clothes, and most of our clothes is still made out of an oil byproduct. But we also need to try and lower our own carbon footprint, as I think that we all need to do first. If it's doing different things, if it's solar on our homes, it's wind on our homes, whenever I come down here and do these type of speeches and stuff like that, I love watching the parking lots and watch all the Priuses pull in. Because it's one of the only places I'll ever see probably a Prius convention is to do stuff like this. So I mean, I think we all need to do that. You look at the cars and stuff that they're building now. They're starting to build, electrical cars. The Prius is obviously a great one, but then the Volt. In San Jose, they're actually to have electric police motorcycles that they do patrol on. So I mean, there's different things that are coming out. And I'm not going to even begin to say that we should use natural gas for oil or for buses and stuff like that. That drives me crazy when I see like the buses and stuff around here that say, "Oh, we run on natural gas," but how are we getting the natural gas? So but that's a whole other tangent. So I think we're going to limit some here soon.
Yeah, we're up against 7 o'clock now, and I want people to be able to have the rest of their evenings, but maybe we can get one or two more brief comments. I think you're Yeah, behind Kim there, yeah.
My name is Joyce Anderson, I'm just an individual. But, I just try to stay informed. As the lady pointed out, it all boils down to money. Has the tribe looked into the legality of charging a fee for every barrel of oil that goes across that non-easement land? That it would be a fee large enough to have them stop sending oil across that land?
They have talked about it. Unfortunately, all the reservations have no taxes, so they don't collect their own taxes. So they'd actually have to create their own tax laws and way of collecting everything.
Why would it be a tax? It would be a fee.
You're not just an individual, you're a politician. So they have talked about doing some stuff like that, and when they go through Leech Lake in the first process, the environmental program did write up a big process on it, and even saying if they charged 2 cents per barrel, you know, it'd be 1.2 or 2 million dollars a day. I mean, it's a huge amount of what they'd be getting.
But don't let the numbers scare you. Charge them $10 a barrel.
Well, yeah, and I'm with you on that, you know. But I kind of go back to the economics of it is that, you know, if we start shutting down these different things, gas is going to go up. Everyone's going to start buying and stop using as much oil. So the prices will go down and try and fluctuate and all that stuff. But everyone will start using less if the prices go up. Obviously in northern Alaska and even in the tar sands themselves where the price of oil or gas is $10 a gallon, you know, they don't necessarily run around for, you know, joyriding too much. Just because of the cost of everything and even the plains, you know, and you talk about the North Slope of Alaska, they charge you probably about $30 for a watermelon just because of the cost of shipping that up there by the pound. So, I mean, it's a huge, once we start looking at the oil and the prices, I think the higher they go, the less everything will be in demand and we'll end up seeing more people just saying, we don't want the tar sands and we don't need the supply. And I think the NAFTA agreement then will end up going to the other direction and it will be violated just because the oil supply will go down.
So just grassroots activism on everybody's part. It always boils down to that.
All right, that was actually an interesting and fruitful enough suggestion that it's. I think we should really cut off the sort of official part of the evening there. I'm sure if people want to hang around and chat a little more, we've probably got some cookies left and other refreshments. I'd like to again thank the folks from Minnesota 350 and all of you for coming out, and can we also once more thank Marty Cobenais. Imagine if people